Rome has fallen. Darkness covers the West. Yet from faith and struggle, a new order rises. An emperor dreams of unity. Through plague and shadows, a dawn begins. This is the story of medieval Europe.
In the heart of the European continent during the Middle Ages, a new civilization was forged. The interplay of nobility and monarchy, faith and warfare, cultural advancement and scholarly pursuits, burgeoning trade and technological innovation, these elements laid the groundwork for the modern world. This narrative chronicles the birth of Europe. Charles Martel's son, Pepin the Short, seized the Frankish throne through a coup. He engaged in conflict with the Lombards in Italy, ultimately granting the Pope an independent, autonomous state, a long-sought objective for the papacy. Pepin's son, Charlemagne, ascended the Frankish throne in 768 CE and dedicated decades to military campaigns, significantly expanding his kingdom's control. He eventually ruled over most of Western Christendom. In 800 CE, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans, signifying the re-emergence of an imperial authority in the West over 3 centuries after the fall of Rome. The Carolingian Empire emerged as the first significant power in the medieval West, leaving a lasting legacy. Charlemagne fostered an intellectual and cultural flourishing, a renaissance that aimed to revive the lost knowledge and culture of antiquity. The empire disseminated political structures, institutions, titles, ranks, and ideals throughout the West. Most importantly, the vision of a unified Christian West. These elements formed the cornerstone of medieval civilization. Despite its impact, the Carolingian Empire was relatively short-lived. The effort to establish centralized rule in the West was undermined by insufficient infrastructure. Small, sparsely populated cities, a weak economy, limited bureaucracy, and poor communication networks. Following Charlemagne's death, his 3 grandsons engaged in bitter conflict, culminating in the Treaty of Verdun in 843 CE, which divided the Frankish Empire among them. The Central Kingdom rapidly diminished, leaving only West Francia, the precursor to France, and East Francia, the precursor to Germany. These kingdoms continued to fragment, a process accelerated by external pressures. The 9th and 10th centuries witnessed a new wave of invasions targeting the weakening Carolingian world from multiple directions. Vikings raided from the north, devastating coastal regions and river systems. Magyars, Hungarians, launched devastating raids from the east, targeting defenseless settlements. Muslim pirates and raiders attacked Europe's southern shores. Europe faced a multifaceted siege. As the West crumbled under repeated attacks, kings lost their authority, while local elites consolidated their power. A dense network of wooden castles sprang up across the landscape, serving as fortified residences for local noble families. From these strongholds, lords exerted control over the surrounding peasantry, extracting resources through coercive means. While peasants had previously formed an integral part of infantry armies, new military innovations, particularly the adoption of the stirrup, established cavalry as the decisive force on the battlefield. This shift in military tactics required resources that only nobles could readily command. As a result, European elites became full-time professional warriors. In this warrior society, territorial power was primarily acquired through vassalage. One noble granted another land and protection in exchange for loyalty and military service. Kingdoms evolved into intricate networks of personal relationships and reciprocal obligations. Kings were often weak, easily overshadowed by their powerful vassals. This system is commonly referred to as feudalism. Centuries would pass before centralized states re-emerged in the West. The 10th century marked a turning point. A period of improved climate boosted agricultural yields. The waves of Viking and Magyar invasions subsided as these groups integrated into Western Christendom. In certain regions, royal authority began to strengthen. In Britain, King Alfred the Great and his successors unified the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, establishing the Kingdom of England. In West Francia, despite ongoing political fragmentation, Vikings who had settled in the north pledged loyalty to the Frankish king, becoming French Christians known as Normans, creating a buffer against further raids. In East Francia, Otto I, king of the Germans, decisively defeated the Hungarians at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955 CE, bringing an end to Eastern invasions. The settled Hungarians subsequently established their own Christian kingdom. Otto the Great's victory culminated in his coronation as emperor in 962 CE, marking the establishment of another Holy Roman Empire, this time a German-based one. After centuries of instability, Europe gradually regained stability and confidence, poised for significant change. The year 1000 CE represents a major turning point in European history, signaling the commencement of approximately 3 centuries of growth and prosperity. Improved climate, combined with new technologies and agricultural techniques, sparked an agricultural revolution. Increased food production fueled population growth, leading to the establishment of new villages and towns, and the expansion of existing ones. Forests were cleared on a massive scale, bringing more land under cultivation. This led to considerable economic expansion and a commercial revival. Flourishing trade networks fueled a significant urbanization process. Old and new cities grew rapidly, evolving into international hubs for a burgeoning merchant class. These merchants gained independence from feudal landowners, forming self-governing municipalities. This trend was particularly pronounced in Italy, where merchants revitalized Mediterranean trade. As living standards improved, the arts, architecture, and music flourished. Literacy rates increased significantly, and the first universities were founded under the church's patronage. European intellectuals initiated a new renaissance, driven by the rediscovery and revival of classical knowledge. Europe was not merely expanding internally, but also extending its reach outward. During the High Middle Ages, aristocrats from the Carolingian heartland embarked on conquest and colonization of new territories, expanding the boundaries of Western Christendom. This process, often described as the Europeanization of Europe, resulted in a larger, more homogeneous civilization. In 1066 CE, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, successfully invaded England, decisively defeating the Anglo-Saxons at the Battle of Hastings and transforming England into a Norman stronghold. In Iberia, the northern Christian kingdoms engaged in a protracted struggle against the Muslim south, progressively expanding their control over the peninsula in what was viewed as a reconquista. In southern Italy and Sicily, Norman warriors conquered vast territories from the Byzantines and Muslims, allying with the Pope to establish another Norman kingdom. In Eastern Europe, German aristocrats and peasants steadily migrated eastward, settling in Slavic lands. The first 2 centuries of the Common Era witnessed the vast Roman Empire dominating the Mediterranean Sea. This period, known as the Pax Romana, was characterized by remarkable stability, widespread prosperity, and relative peace. Roman citizens enjoyed a flourishing culture, a decent quality of life, and a significant degree of security. This stability was a direct result of Rome's centralized government and its advanced infrastructure network, which connected the far-flung corners of the empire. European ambitions extended even further. In 1095 CE, Pope Urban II called upon Christian warriors to liberate Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim control, launching the Crusades. Crusader armies advanced eastward, establishing several states along the Mediterranean coast. While these states proved to be relatively weak and were eventually reconquered by Muslim forces over the following 2 centuries, they nevertheless signaled a significant shift. The Catholic Church had reasserted its power and influence. In the early Middle Ages, the papacy was weak, wielding little authority outside Italy. The Church itself was a decentralized network of priests and monks, appointed and controlled by local aristocrats. The 10th and 11th centuries witnessed a significant reform movement aiming to reshape both the Church and society. Reformers sought to free the Church from the world, to extricate it from the influence of kings and nobles, and restructure it as a papal monarchy. Pope Gregory VII, a staunch reformer, clashed with Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV over the authority to appoint bishops within the empire. Their initial conflict concluded with Henry's humiliating 3-day vigil in the snow outside Canossa, pleading for the Pope's forgiveness. However, a subsequent confrontation ended with Henry invading and installing his own pope, forcing Gregory into exile. While it initially appeared that the emperor had triumphed, the 12th century revealed the ultimate victory of the papacy and the reform movement. The Church had transformed into a robust, centralized, hierarchical organization with sophisticated administrative and legal systems, wielding immense power across Europe, with the Pope as its absolute monarch. The growing power of the papacy aroused the envy of kings, who subsequently sought to emulate the Church's centralized authority. Medieval kings, however, faced limitations imposed by the powerful armed aristocracy. The High Middle Ages witnessed a substantial increase in the number of aristocrats and castles, with stone increasingly replacing wood in castle construction, leading to larger, more formidable structures. Aristocratic lifestyles and culture were refined with the emergence of the Christian knight ideal and the chivalric code of conduct. However, in certain regions, the rise of stronger kings and kingdoms posed a challenge to aristocratic power. In England, the Anglo-Norman dynasty established a relatively small, consolidated state, distinct from the more fragmented feudal structures prevalent on the continent. In Iberia, the Reconquista strengthened Christian kings, enabling the emergence of centralized states. In France, the Capetian dynasty gradually expanded its territories, laying the groundwork for a functioning centralized state. In contrast, the Holy Roman Empire experienced the opposite, fragmenting into a mosaic of autonomous principalities. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa's attempts to restore the empire's former glory ultimately failed, leaving the imperial title, now bestowed by electors, largely symbolic. The High Middle Ages witnessed an agricultural revolution, urbanization, territorial expansion, the strengthening of both the papacy and monarchies, and a vibrant cultural renaissance. However, around 1300 CE, a deterioration in climate brought an end to this period of growth, leading to widespread famine. A major calamity was looming. The 14th century marked a critical turning point in European history. In 1347 CE, the Black Death, a devastating pandemic, reached Europe. It spread rapidly, decimating approximately 1/3 of the continent's population within a few years. This unprecedented demographic catastrophe wiped out entire settlements. Recurring outbreaks of the plague would continue to plague Europe for centuries. Despite the devastation, Europe ultimately recovered during the 14th and 15th centuries. For some survivors, the aftermath of the plague brought unexpected opportunities. The dramatic population decline led to increased land availability and a soaring demand for labor. This shift in demographics empowered peasants and workers who demanded better working conditions. When elites resisted, revolts erupted across Europe, most brutally suppressed. Yet long-term change was inevitable. In Western Europe, peasants gained new freedoms and opportunities, while workers enjoyed higher wages. From the ashes of the plague emerged a surge in creativity and innovation. Technological advancements, such as windmills, water mills, eyeglasses, improved metalworking techniques, and the printing press transformed life and productivity. In the rapidly recovering cities, new cultural trends thrived, especially in Italy, where a new Renaissance flourished, aiming to revive and surpass the cultural achievements of ancient Greece and Rome. Renaissance scholars developed a new worldview and redefined humanity's place within it. They characterized the preceding millennium as the Dark Ages, positioning themselves as the bridge between the medieval and modern worlds. In the late 14th and 15th centuries, gunpowder revolutionized European warfare. The most skilled knight could be felled by a common infantryman from a distance, and even the strongest castles could be breached by cannons. The cost of supporting these new infantry and artillery armies was substantial, a financial burden only kings could bear. As kings sought to monopolize the use of force within their territories, they consolidated their power and asserted their dominance over the aristocracy. Nobles, having lost their military superiority, transitioned into roles as administrators and courtiers within royal courts. The modern sovereign state was beginning to emerge. These turbulent times saw Europe's new military technologies repeatedly tested. The 100 Years' War, fought between England and France, devastated the French countryside, only to be dramatically reversed by the intervention of Joan of Arc, a peasant girl who rallied French troops against the English, ultimately driving the English out of France. In Iberia, the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile led to the unification of Spain. Their combined armies conquered Granada, the last Muslim stronghold on the Iberian Peninsula. These developments laid the foundations for the modern nation-states of England, France, and Spain. Other regions, such as Germany and Italy, would have to wait centuries for their unification. However, even within this era of Roman dominance, seeds of change were being sown. On the eastern fringes of the empire, a new religion was taking root: Christianity. Originating as a small Jewish sect, it gradually permeated the pagan Roman world. By the 4th century CE, it had gained the emperor's favor, becoming the official state religion. Paradoxically, this adoption coincided with the beginning of Rome's decline. The empire grappled with significant challenges: rampant inflation, devastating plagues, widespread famine, and increasingly frequent barbarian invasions. The immense task of governing such a vast territory from a single center proved increasingly untenable. As the Middle Ages drew to a close, Europe had not only recovered from the devastation of the Black Death, but had also rebuilt itself on stronger foundations. Its focus gradually shifted outward. By 1500 CE, Portugal had explored Africa and the Indian Ocean, establishing commercial routes to the Far East, while Spain turned westward, crossing the Atlantic Ocean to reach the Americas. Columbus's voyage in 1492 CE is often cited as marking the end of the Middle Ages and the dawn of the modern era. Over the following centuries, European expansion would transform the globe, shaping the modern world we inhabit today. In 395 CE, the Roman Empire underwent a crucial division: a Western Roman Empire, with its capital in Rome, and an Eastern Roman Empire ruled from Constantinople, later known as the Byzantine Empire. A stark contrast emerged between the two halves. The East remained largely urban, wealthy, and prosperous, while the West became increasingly rural, impoverished, and militarily weak. This vulnerability proved to be its undoing. Beyond the empire's borders, in the deep forests of Germania, powerful barbarian groups, predominantly Germanic tribes led by ambitious warlords and their fiercely loyal warriors, were on the move. These tribes exerted increasing pressure along the Rhine and Danube rivers, relentlessly pushing against the empire's frontiers. Faced with this relentless pressure, the Western Roman Empire reluctantly began permitting the entry of these groups. This ultimately led to a breach of the imperial borders, facilitating migrations and settlements within the empire's territory. Whether they were considered guests or invaders, these newcomers gradually carved out territories within the crumbling Roman state, further weakening imperial authority. The year 476 CE marked a pivotal moment. Odoacer, a barbarian leader, deposed Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. While this child emperor held little real power, his removal symbolized the definitive end of the Western Roman Empire, ushering in the so-called Dark Ages. The fusion of Romans, Christians, and barbarians formed the essential components of the emerging medieval Europe. Around 500 CE, a patchwork of newly established kingdoms emerged across Europe, each ruled by a barbarian king. The ruling elites, a blend of Roman and barbarian lineages, gradually embraced Christianity. Among the most significant kingdoms were the Ostrogoths in Italy, the Visigoths in Spain, and the Franks in Gaul. However, these nascent kingdoms lacked crucial elements for effective governance. The great cities of antiquity suffered depopulation, some falling into ruin. The sophisticated Roman transportation network decayed, severely hampering communication and long-distance trade. The use of coinage virtually disappeared, crippling the economic system and leaving no reliable means to support professional armies. Literacy rates plummeted, significantly weakening administrative capabilities. Most critically, peace and security were absent. The impoverished rural West became increasingly localized, fracturing politically and linguistically. In the early centuries of the Middle Ages, it lagged significantly behind its more powerful neighbors to the east and south. In the 6th century, Byzantine Emperor Justinian the Firm attempted a daring campaign to reconquer the West and restore the Roman Empire to its former glory. After successfully wresting Italy from the Romanized Ostrogoths, the peninsula fell prey to yet another wave of invaders, the Lombards. This defeat forced the Byzantines to acknowledge the permanent division between East and West. This was followed by another fundamental division, a North-South divide. In the 7th century, Arab armies surged across the Middle East and North Africa with breathtaking speed, establishing the vast Islamic Caliphate. The once unified Mediterranean world was now fragmented into 3 distinct civilizations: the Islamic world, the Byzantine Empire, and medieval Europe. For a brief period in the 8th century, the vulnerable Western Roman world seemed on the verge of being overwhelmed by the expanding caliphate. Muslim armies decisively defeated the Visigothic kingdom in Spain and launched devastating raids into Francia. However, this expansion was decisively halted in 732 CE at the Battle of Tours, where the Frankish forces under Charles Martel triumphed. This victory marked a critical turning point, halting the westward advance of Islam and establishing the Carolingian dynasty, which would profoundly shape European history.